Garden mulch is incredibly important when it comes to the garden. Today's video, we're going to be talking about mulch, and I actually want to show you how I use the mulch. I want to show you how I transplant into mulch versus removing it and transplanting into it, how I sow seeds with mulch, etc. and so forth. So this is a crash course in mulch, regardless of the mulch type you're using. So first thing I do want to get out of the way is the actual mulch myths out there. One of which is that mulch can remove nitrogen from the soil. And this is true. Mulches can remove nitrogen from surrounding soil. And this is particularly true for fresh mulches, such as fresh wood chips or really fresh straw, hay, etc. and so forth, along with grass clippings, for example, a very green, fresh source of mulch. Now, what I will say is that nitrogen depletion from the soil surface isn't a bad thing. That's actually what helps it suppress the weeds. Now, what I will say is incorporating this into the soil profile is not ideal. So what you want to make sure you're doing when you're using a mulch is actually removing it rather than incorporating it into your soil profile. This is incredibly important in the fall or spring whenever you choose to actually remove that mulch, and whenever possible you want to compost it, reuse it on the soil surface rather than incorporating. If you're using transplants, then you actually can add the mulch right away. And this is because the mulch is not going to affect the nitrogen uptake of the plant due to the general size of them, such as these tomatoes here behind me. However, if you're sowing seeds, this actually may affect their growth pattern. And this is even more true for seeds that are sown on the surface, such as lettuce, for example. So when you're sowing seeds, you actually want to have it as bare ground in the beginning. Very important. And what we're going to do is wait for those seedlings to grow up before we apply the mulch to that bed. So I'm using wood chip mulch, a little bit of an aged wood chip mulch here behind me in my tomatoes. This is my least favorite mulch in an annual bed where I'm planting and gardening on a continual basis. So definitely something you want to think about there is actually staying away from wood chip mulch unless it's in a perennial bed. In a perennial bed, wood chip mulch works fantastically, but in a vegetable garden, there are a few other options. Option number one is going to shock you, but that is peat. Yes, peat moss, compost, or manure are considered mulches. And if you top dress with these, then you will get some weed suppression in the beginning, but in particular, you're going to get a cooling of that lower mineral soil combined with more moisture retention. Long term, not the greatest at suppressing weeds, only because of its reduced freshness and its already bioavailability and lack of nitrogen sequestration. So definitely something to think about if you're on a budget and you want to buy something cheap. A big bale of peat is about $10 and it can do a lot of yard and it will actually help with moisture retention. So if your only battle is keeping the soil moist, then consider peat over other more expensive mulches that are out there. Mulch option number two is straw. Yes, straw. Now, straw from an actual bale, such as what this is a little bit inconvenient to work with. So what I mean by that is the actual straw itself, when it's not shredded or put into a fine material like the garden straw you can purchase, it tends to need more of it in order to cover the soil surface appropriately. So our soil surface cannot be exposed whenever possible when using a mulch. The reason for this is because exposed soil is still susceptible to exposure of weeds, and it also is susceptible to drying out and actually collecting a little bit of that heat. So we want to cover that soil surface appropriately. And when we're using the big, thick straw, we need to put a pretty thick layer, usually about 3 inches, in order to get that proper coverage we're looking for. However, if we were to run this straw over with a lawnmower, maybe pick it up with a leaf blower, or put it in a container with a whippersnipper and actually cut it up into smaller pieces, we wouldn't need as thick of a layer to obtain the objective we're looking for, which is complete coverage. Now, my favorite mulch, and unfortunately the mulch I can no longer use, is grass. I have turned my entire garden, yes, my entire garden, in my entire lawn, see, into a garden, meaning I don't have much grass left, but my all-time favorite mulch, hands down, is grass. It is finely cut, so it beats straw from a bale, and it is very effective in weed suppression, moisture capture, cooling the soil, and it's free. Yes, free. Like I said, we don't want to incorporate it into our soil, but we can use it whenever we want. So like I mentioned, when it comes to sowing seeds, I like to sow my seeds and then let them get about 2 inches in height before actually applying the mulch. I know this is inconvenient, but the mulch can suppress germination, ultimately affecting the yield and the effectiveness of your garden. So this is an example here of a seed sown garden. Nothing's come up yet except for a couple beets in a few spaces, but otherwise I'm waiting it out, and I'm going to continue to wait until they're a little bit larger before I apply that mulch. Similar to what we saw with those beans, that height those beans were in the straw is what I'm looking for from this bed before any mulch is applied. This includes whether I was using wood chips, straw, grass, or peat. This line up here are onion starts, ones I started from seed, and they're very tiny, and you can kind of see them poking up through the mulch. Now this one in particular, I actually applied the mulch first and then actually sowed or transplanted my starts in the mulch. And this you want to use for any starts that are smaller in nature. So onions, lettuce, radishes, beets that you start in cells and transplant outdoors, try this method. Apply the mulch, then move the mulch out of the way and do your transplant with your dibber. What you want to do, this is going to allow you to mulch sooner. Smaller things like the lettuce and the onions or the leeks, whatever the case is, it's hard to mulch this even once they are more mature, like this garlic here. They're just not, it's the way it's set up. It's just not ideal for mulching. So mulch first and then transplant into that. For larger things like the tomatoes and stuff, you can transplant and then mulch, of course, because you'd be moving soil on top of the mulch and it gets ugly looking. There's no big deal with it. It's not as appealing to the eye. So there you guys have it when it comes to mulching your garden. I hope this did help you out. If it did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video. Always drop the comments on what you want to see. I need video ideas all the time.